The shovel hit something solid with a dull thud. My heart raced as I brushed away the loose dirt, revealing a coffin lid. This was it. Another successful night's work, but I had no idea that this particular grave would change everything, that it would open a door to a world I was never meant to see. My name's Jack, and I'm what you might call a grave robber. It's not a job I'm proud of, but it pays the bills. Or at least it did, until that fateful night in Oakwood Cemetery. I'd been tipped off about a fresh burial. Some rich old lady with a fortune in jewelry. Easy pickings, or so I thought. As I pried open the coffin lid, my flashlight beam fell on something unexpected. Nestled in the corpse's bony hands was a strange amulet. It was made of tarnished silver, with a large milky white stone at its center. Without thinking, I grabbed it. The moment my fingers touched the cold metal, a jolt ran through my body. The world around me seemed to shift, like a radio tuning between stations, and then I heard it. A whisper so faint I almost missed it. "Help me." I dropped the amulet like it was on fire. The voice had come from nowhere and everywhere at once. I looked around, half expecting to see someone standing over me, but I was alone in the moonlit graveyard. Shaken, I finished my grim task and headed home. I told myself it was just my imagination, the stress of the job getting to me. But deep down, I knew something had changed. The next few days were quiet. I kept the amulet hidden away, trying to forget about it, but its pull was too strong. Late one night, I took it out again. As soon as I touched it, the whispering started. "We see you, Jack. We know what you've done. Join us." Voices overlapped, some pleading, others angry, all of them dead. I realized with growing horror that the amulet was some kind of conduit, allowing me to hear the voices of those I'd disturbed in their eternal rest. At first, I thought I could use this to my advantage. The dead knew secrets, after all, where valuables were hidden, where bodies were buried. But the more I listened, the more I realized the danger I was in. The voices never stopped. They followed me everywhere, growing louder and more insistent. They whispered of dark things, of the pain of death and the horrors that lay beyond. They begged me to help them, to join them, to set them free. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. The voices were driving me mad. I tried to get rid of the amulet, but it always found its way back to me. I'd wake up in the middle of the night to find it clutched in my hand, the voices screaming in my head. One voice rose above the others. A woman, her tone cold and commanding. She claimed to be the amulet's original owner, a powerful witch who had cheated death centuries ago. She promised me power beyond my wildest dreams if I would just do one simple thing: help her return to the world of the living. All it would take, she said, was a sacrifice. A life for a life. And then all the voices would stop. I was tempted. God help me, I was tempted. Anything to make the voices stop. But I knew, deep down, that it would only lead to something worse. In desperation, I sought out an expert in the occult, an old woman who lived on the edge of town. She took one look at the amulet and recoiled in fear. She told me its true nature, a cursed object that fed on the souls of the dead and the sanity of the living. There was only one way to destroy it, she said. It had to be returned to the grave of its creator and shattered at the stroke of midnight on a new moon. Finding the witch's grave wasn't easy. The voices fought me every step of the way, trying to mislead me, to drive me off course. But finally, I stood before a crumbling tombstone in an abandoned churchyard. As midnight approached, the voices reached a fever pitch. They screamed, they pleaded, they threatened. The witch's voice rose above them all, promising me everything if I would just walk away. My hands shook as I raised a heavy rock. The amulet seemed to pulse in my grip, the stone at its center glowing with an unearthly light. For a moment I hesitated. Power, wealth, knowledge, it could all be mine. But then I thought of the voices, of the madness they'd brought me, of the darkness that lurked just beyond the veil, waiting to break through. I brought the rock down hard. The amulet shattered with a sound like 1,000 screaming souls. A shockwave knocked me off my feet, and for a moment, the world went dark. When I came to, the graveyard was silent. The voices were gone. I was alone with nothing but the wind in the trees and the distant hoot of an owl. I'd like to say that was the end of it, that I learned my lesson and left the dead to rest in peace. But the truth is, once you've heard the whispers from beyond the grave, you can never truly unhear them. Sometimes, in the dead of night, I still catch echoes of those voices, calling to me, waiting for me. And I wonder, how long until they find a way to reach me again? So if you ever find yourself in a graveyard at night and you see something glinting in the moonlight, do yourself a favor, leave it where it lies. Because trust me, some messages are better left unheard. I never should have opened that dusty old music box. Its haunting melody still echoes in my mind, a constant reminder of the nightmare I unleashed. But I have to tell this story. Maybe it'll help someone else avoid my mistake. It all started last month when I helped my grandma clean out her attic. Among the cobwebs and forgotten treasures, I found an ornate wooden box. Its delicate carvings and tarnished brass hinges hinted at its age. Grandma couldn't remember where it came from, so she let me keep it. Back home, I carefully opened the box. A tinkling tune filled the air, soft and sweet at first. But as the melody looped, something changed. The notes twisted, becoming darker, more insistent. I felt an urge to move, to sway with the music. Before I knew it, I was dancing. My feet moved of their own accord, spinning me around my living room. At first, it was fun, exhilarating even. But as minutes turned to hours, panic set in. I couldn't stop. My legs ached, my lungs burned, but still I danced. Just when I thought I'd collapse, the music stopped. The box had wound down. I fell to the floor, exhausted and terrified. What had just happened to me? I tried to convince myself it was just a weird fluke. Maybe I'd been more tired than I realized. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. The next day, my little sister Amy came to visit. She spotted the music box and begged to hear it play. Against my better judgment, I wound it up. The melody started again, and Amy's eyes glazed over. She began to dance, twirling and leaping with unnatural grace. I watched in horror as Amy danced for hours, her movements growing more frantic. I tried to stop her, to close the box, but nothing worked. The music had to play out. When Amy finally collapsed, I knew I had to do something. This wasn't just some harmless antique. It was dangerous, maybe even deadly. I started researching, digging into the history of cursed objects and haunted music boxes. Most of what I found was nonsense, but a few stories stood out. Tales of people dancing themselves to death, of melodies that possessed the soul. One account mentioned a way to break the spell. Destroy the music box at the stroke of midnight during a full moon. It sounded like something out of a bad movie, but I was desperate enough to try anything. The wait for the next full moon was agonizing. I locked the music box away, but its siren song called to me. More than once I caught myself reaching for it, longing to hear that deadly tune again. Finally, the night arrived. I took the box to a clearing in the woods, far from anyone who might hear its melody. As midnight approached, I raised a hammer, ready to smash the cursed thing to pieces. But I hesitated. The box was so beautiful, so alluring. Maybe one last dance wouldn't hurt. No. I shook off the thought and brought the hammer down hard. The wood splintered, gears and springs flying everywhere. A piercing wail filled the air, like 1,000 voices screaming in agony. Then, silence. Sweet, blessed silence. I gathered up the broken pieces and buried them deep in the earth. As I walked home, I felt lighter, as if a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. But the story doesn't end there. Sometimes, late at night, I swear I can still hear that melody. It whispers on the wind, calling me to dance once more. And occasionally I see others, strangers on the street, moving with that same unnatural grace I remember all too well. I destroyed the music box, but did I really break the curse? Or did I just set it free? So I'm telling you this story as a warning. If you ever come across an old music box, think twice before you open it. That sweet melody might be the last thing you ever hear. And if you find yourself suddenly compelled to dance, fight it with everything you've got. Because once the music starts, it's nearly impossible to stop. I thought I'd saved everyone by destroying that cursed box. But now I'm not so sure. The melody is out there, waiting for its next victim. And I can't help but wonder, will it be you? So listen closely. Do you hear it? That faint, haunting tune on the breeze? It's calling to you, begging you to dance. But whatever you do, don't give in. Don't let the music box claim another soul, because once you start dancing, you might never stop. I've lived in Millbrook all my life, but I never knew the true cost of our town's most cherished tradition. Not until it was too late. The Centennial Feast, they called it. A celebration of life, of community, of history. If only we'd known what lurked beneath the surface of our quaint little town. It started like any other day. The sun rose over the rolling hills, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. But there was something different in the air. A buzz of excitement, a current of anticipation that ran through the streets like electricity. Today was the day. The Centennial Feast. It only came once every 100 years, and this was my first time experiencing it. The whole town had been preparing for months, dusting off old recipes, hanging decorations, and sharing stories passed down through generations. I remember my grandfather telling me about the last feast when I was just a boy. His eyes would light up as he described the food, the music, the sense of unity that brought the whole town together. But there was always something off about his stories. A shadow that would pass over his face, a tremor in his voice when he spoke of the night's end. I never understood why. Until now. The day of the feast dawned bright and clear. Main Street was transformed, lined with booths selling everything from apple pies to hand-carved trinkets. The air was thick with the scent of roasting meat and sweet spices. As the sun began to set, we all gathered in the town square. Tables groaned under the weight of countless dishes, each family contributing their best recipes. We ate, we drank, we laughed. For a few hours, it felt like we were part of something bigger than ourselves. But as night fell, things began to change. The music, which had been lively and cheerful, took on a darker tone. The melodies became more haunting, the rhythms more insistent. I saw people moving differently, their dance steps becoming almost ritualistic. And then there was the old clock tower. It had stood silent for as long as I could remember, its hands frozen at midnight. But tonight, it began to tick. Each second echoed through the square, growing louder as the hour approached. At first I thought I was imagining things. The wine, the excitement, the late hour, surely that explained the growing sense of unease. But then I saw the looks on the faces of the older townspeople. The fear in their eyes, the grim set of their mouths. They knew something they'd kept hidden for a century. As the clock struck 11, Mayor Thompson called for silence. His voice shook as he spoke of an ancient pact, a bargain struck with forces beyond our understanding. The feast wasn't just a celebration, he said. It was a payment. Every 100 years, the town had to offer a sacrifice, a life freely given to keep the darkness at bay. Without it, unspeakable horrors would be unleashed upon us all. Panic rippled through the crowd. Parents clutched their children close. Friends looked at each other with suspicion and fear. Who would be chosen? Who would have to die so the rest could live? The mayor produced an old wooden box, its surface carved with symbols I didn't recognize. Inside were slips of paper, one for every adult in town. The lucky one would bear a black mark. I watched in horror as my neighbors, people I'd known all my life, stepped forward to draw their fate. With each name called, the tension grew. The clock ticked on, each second bringing us closer to midnight. And then it was my turn. My hand shook as I reached into the box. The paper felt rough against my fingers like sandpaper. I unfolded it slowly, my heart pounding in my chest. A black smudge stared back at me. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. I heard screams, sobs, but they sounded far away. All I could focus on was that damned black mark. Strong hands gripped my arms, pulling me towards the center of the square. I didn't resist, couldn't resist. It was as if all the fight had drained out of me. They led me to an old stone altar, hidden beneath the clock tower all these years. As they bound my wrists and ankles, I looked out at the faces of my friends and neighbors. Some were weeping, others looked away. A few watched with a mix of relief and guilt. The clock began to chime. Midnight had come. Mayor Thompson raised a knife, its blade gleaming in the moonlight. As it descended, I closed my eyes, bracing for the end. But the blow never came. Instead, I heard a scream. Not mine, but the mayor's. I opened my eyes to see him backing away from the altar, his face pale with terror. Something was emerging from the shadows, something ancient and hungry with too many eyes and too many teeth. The sacrifice had been rejected. As chaos erupted around me, one thought echoed in my mind. We were too late. The darkness had already arrived, and Millbrook would never, be the same again. We hope you enjoyed this chilling tale. If it sent shivers down your spine, give us a thumbs up and share your thoughts in the comments below. What was your favorite part? Don't forget to subscribe for more spine-tingling stories and hit that notification bell so you never miss a scare. Until next time, stay spooky and remember, sometimes the darkest shadows hide the most terrifying secret.